What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, also joined by a little 28-pound dog named Lolly. And I wanted to do a little something today. It's July. Not much is going on, so I said, you know what it's time for? A little draft. You know we all love the draft. How about a coaching draft? What if every coach in the NFL was available? You didn't have a team. You didn't have players. You just had to pick who you'd want to coach to build your team with. You don't get to bring your quarterback. You don't get to bring your defense. Start from scratch. Who would you hire? I removed Andy Reid because he's clearly the number one overall choice. There is no debate there. So I removed him. So out of the other 31 guys, who would you want? I dove into the exercise. We're going to start at 10 and work down to 1. The guys that I would hire in what order. So that's what we're going to do. Because it's the offseason, thought I'd have a little fun. I like talking about coaches. I think about this sometimes. Probably equally as much as players and probably more. Especially when the season comes in. And that's the best part about football. The coaches really matter. We've talked about it in other sports. You could argue they simply don't. Definitely not nearly as much as this sport. And the head coach in the NFL changes your franchise. And if you get the right guy, if you get, an ascending guy, if you get a young guy who turns into a star, it changes the landscape of your football team. So that's what we're going to do. But before we do, you guys want to do something this summer? Well, why wouldn't you? Get outside, go enjoy yourself, do something fun. I got you covered. Because my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime, has you covered. And here's the thing. What do you want to do? Go see some live music? The Grateful Dead's been rocking at the Sphere. I hear that's awesome. When I was in for the Super Bowl, I saw the Sphere. It looked sweet. I'd never been there, but my producer, James, went. He said it's badass. You want to go to a concert, Zach Bryan, Taylor Swift, you name it. Whoever's hot out there on the streets. You want to go to a game, the Yankees, the Dodgers, my people in Philly. Don't sleep on those Phillies. They are hot. Bryce Harper, pretty good signing back in the day. But here's the thing. Just do it with Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Let's start at 10. I'm going to go Sean McDermott in my coaching draft. Look through the landscape, and it kind of hit me. I actually think this guy's a little underrated. I would imagine if you just asked a casual fan about Sean McDermott, it wouldn't be that positive. You definitely wouldn't put his name with the top guys in the NFL. Yet he's won the division 4 straight times, and people forget his first year there made the playoffs as a wild card. Now, he got a little lucky. Remember the last day of the season, Andy Dalton. But regardless, he inherited a joke franchise. The Bills were a laughingstock when he showed up. And now they aren't just like a perennial Super Bowl contender. They own their division, which New England did for 20 years. And they are, the last couple years, right? This year was a bad loss, but they had a ton of injuries. So you could argue, should he have won that game? He was favored against the Chiefs at home. 2 years ago, the Hamlin thing, the snowstorms, they ran out of gas, and they got their ass kicked by the Bengals. They did. It happened. I mean, it was bad. But 3 years ago is, to me, the biggest blemish on his resume, the 13-second game against the Chiefs. That can't happen. That is easily one of the worst losses of the last 20 years. But here's what you got to give him. He's in the fight. He's in the hunt. And his team, I think, one thing I learned last year when I picked the Jets, which sounds insane to say out loud, obviously Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles changed their season. But were the Jets winning that division last year? Were they going to win 11 games? I thought last year was a culture season for Sean McDermott. His team was 6-6. He fired an offensive coordinator. The Dolphins looked like they were going to cruise the division. And then what happens? Oh, it gets cold. It gets difficult. And that's where his team's built for. I was around him when I worked with the Eagles. I like him a lot. He's a serious cat. I mean, this is a guy, I think he's mid to late 40s. He's wired like a dude from the 40s. I mean, this guy is not a screw around guy. I think he's loosened up a little bit as time has gone, but there is no debate he's a really good coach. And if he was an offensive coach, I don't think anyone would debate where he lands as a top 10 guy. I think Sean McDermott is going to continue to have success. I think this year I would look for them to win 11, 12 wins again. And I would be stunned if for the foreseeable future, they don't dominate that division. And listen, when you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, you have a chance to win. But even in this exercise, like we don't have Josh Allen. It doesn't matter. When he showed up to Buffalo, guess what? They didn't have Josh Allen either. They were a laughingstock. They weren't like this dominant operation going to the playoffs every year, Bills Mafia front and center. They weren't playing every other week in the afternoon game on CBS with Nance and Romo in primetime games. And he's turned them into, obviously the brand from when, back in the early 90s, they were a big-time program. But for most of my life, they've kind of been irrelevant. And Sean McDermott has, obviously Josh Allen has played a role in this too, but like he's 78-47 as a head coach, 5-6 in the playoffs. Playoffs, listen, that's why he's 10. If he brought a little more to the playoffs, you couldn't debate he'd have to go higher. So I got Sean McDermott at 10. At 9, this guy was fascinating because, one, I thought he should have got fired last year or mutually gone their separate ways. I thought it was time for a change. I never thought Mike Tomlin was a bad coach. And if Mike Tomlin would have been available last year, he would have been the number one choice for multiple teams. And if he had taken a year off to go into TV, he would have came back and had 3 or 4 job offers. He's a big-time football coach. Now, he has some flaws, yes, right? The quarterback situation post-Roethlisberger is not something he can really fix. He has nothing to do with the quarterback, right? And we've seen them struggle over the last several years there. Now, this year is going to be a big something to keep an eye on if they can resurrect that room with the group. But there is no disputing his team for 15 plus years. They don't lose. They do not lose. And I lean offensive coaches, and that's how this list will eventually play out. But I do like old school tough guys. Sean McDermott's one. Mike Tomlin's one. Ironically, they played together in college. Like, I know what I'm getting with Mike Tomlin. Leader of men. He's pretty good at hiring coaches. Obviously, his defense, he knows defensive talent because of the culture that he's been around. If you hired Mike Tomlin, you would feel really good about it. You really would. Now, once upon a time, he would have been way higher on this list. The Super Bowl he won was in 2008. To put that into perspective, it was my first year at Fresno State. I thought about this the other day. It's been like 15 years since I had that job. And that was, I'm talking 2010 when I left Fresno State. So it's been a long, long time. But to me, this list is less about Super Bowl championships. And, Belichick and Andy aren't a part of this. There's only a couple guys with one Super Bowl on this list. Here's the thing, though. It is about playoff victories and having success in the playoffs. Like, Sean McDermott has been winning playoff games the last several years. Hell, he just beat Mike Tomlin this year. Now, Mike Tomlin's resume is a lot longer. That's why I gave him the slight nod. Plus, who would I rather hang out with on a daily basis? Feels like Tomlin. But Tomlin has not won a playoff game in 8+ years. And I'm not sure it's going to happen this year. That does not kind of deter me away from just acting like this guy's some bum. But there's a reason he's 9 and not 3 or 4. Where if we went back 6-7 years, I think most people would have considered him a top 5 coach. And I think he's dipped down a little bit, but his floor, and I gamble on golf a lot. I gamble on a lot of guys to finish top 20 and top 10 because I think their floors are high. I feel very comfortable betting top 10s on Xander in a major. Up until the PGA, the dude wasn't winning majors. But you could make a shitload of money riding him to finish 6th, 7th, or 8th, right? And that's what Mike Tomlin feels like. And that's what the Rooneys are cool with. But if you were starting from scratch and you got a guy, worst case scenario, every year going to win 9 or 10 games, you could do a lot worse. And let's face it, he's kind of a star. He really is. There there's more substance there, but he's got there are certain guys that are just bigger than life. Parcells was like this. Gruden was like this. And Tomlin definitely has some of that. Owns the room. He's good for business. It's just a positive person to have around. And like I said, I'm not just picking him because of that. Worst case scenario, I'm winning 9 games. Now, ideally, you'd like to win 12, but he hasn't done that in a couple years. We'll see. A lot of pressure on him this year. 8. This is like buying a stock early. When you're like, God, this thing's like $10. And you kind of go, look at the industry they're in. This thing in like 5 years, could it be 100? Now, sometimes that $10 stock, what do you think could be 100, goes to 4. But when I look at Shane Steichen, I go, he's everything I want in a coach. He's the offensive play caller. He's worked with every different style of starting quarterback. Phillip Rivers couldn't beat my dog in a race. Justin Herbert literally had to play because Tyrod Taylor got poked in the kidney, 30 minutes before the game. Didn't prepare all week long. And then obviously Justin's rookie season was fantastic. Then he goes to Philadelphia, where it's pretty clear Nick Sirianni has no business calling plays. It's why, since he gave it up to Shane, he has not taken it back. Ben Johnson, fired. Now he's on to Kellen Moore. Well, Jalen Hurts easily had the best stretch of his short career and ultimately earned a massive payday because of the work this guy did. Now, there is a big unknown with the Colts, but here's what I like about Shane Steichen. Last year, they take this Anthony Richardson guy who needs a ton of work. Then he gets injured early in the season. I heard Chris Ballard talking about this on Mike Lombardi's podcast. He said you get ready all week with this one player, and then you go to Gardner Minshew, whose skill set is the complete opposite of Anthony Richardson. So the plays and the things that you would want Anthony to excel at, Gardner can't even think or dream about doing. So you have to change the game plan completely on the fly in the middle of the game. And then the rest of the season, if I would have told you that Gardner Minshew had to start the majority of the season for the Colts, I would have been like 6-7 wins. He not only won 9, he was a shitty Gardner Minshew pass and a dropped ball away with a running back from winning the division and being 10-7 and being what we talk about the Houston Texans being. But I love a head coach who calls the plays and impacts the quarterback. Look at these quarterback salaries. That's where your biggest investment goes. There's a reason D-line coaches aren't getting head coaching jobs. It's like there's a reason linebacker coaches don't get head coaching jobs. Everyone wants the quarterback who calls the plays. That's what you want. And this guy was a college quarterback. I think he's got a chance in the next 3 or 4 years. I think the Colts are going to be really good, but this is exactly what you're looking for when you hire a head coach. Look at the Giants. They hired Brian Daboll, who we'll see. I mean, has a big year coming up. And then right away, he gave the offensive coordinator job to Mike Kafka, who I like a lot. But it's like, Brian, I'm hiring you because you're the offensive coordinator and what you did with Josh Allen. I want you to work with the quarterback 24/7, 365 and call the plays. Like, no, I want someone. I want to be a CEO. I'm sorry. In 2024, I want my head coach calling the plays. The guy who's not even on this list because we all agree is the number one, Andy Reid, who's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Head coach, quarterback guy, play caller. That's what we're looking for. So I'm betting big on Shane Steichen. I think the Colts, I wouldn't say lucked into him, but getting rid of Frank was obviously the right move. And the debacle that was Jeff Saturday led them to this. I'm really bullish on Shane Steichen. If he was my coach, I'd feel really good about it. This was a guy a couple years ago that, I think a lot of people in the media, well-educated, look down on the quote-unquote meatheads. They don't have much in common with them, right? And Dan Campbell early on was just viewed as this kind of meathead lifter, probably 2 tins of Copenhagen a day, 8 coffees, not much in common with, the educated elites. And then the more and more I've watched Dan Campbell over the last couple of years, just press conference, I go, this guy is way smarter than the way everyone acted like he was early on. Ultimately, though, that's not how we judge this operation. Do you win or do you lose? It's the best part about sports, specifically football. There's no guessing. There's no, well, it could have been. We might have this deal. We might get this done. I got this project on the way. We got this land we're working on. I mean, a lot of business is a lot of talking, right? Now, you either ultimately close it or you don't, but sometimes they're not deadlines or whatever. There's a game, you win or you lose it. There's a season, 17 games. How many did you win? How many did you lose? This guy inherited. You think Sean McDermott inherited a shitty operation in Buffalo? It doesn't get any worse than Detroit. And the difference is Detroit has no history. They hadn't been to the NFC Championship game since 1992. They hadn't won multiple playoff games in like 60 years. He inherited a team. They went 3-13, and it was ugly. It was bad. And within a couple years, with a great trade of Matt Stafford and just a culture, a toughness, he can relate to players. He's smart, but the way they play, like you watch his team play, you go, yeah, I understand what Dan Campbell wants to do. A lot closer to the Harbaugh brothers than any of the people that wrote him off 3 years ago want to admit. 3-13, 9-8. In the last game of the season, they didn't make the playoffs, obviously. They couldn't because I forget the exact scenario now off the top of my head. But they ended Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay Packer career. And then last year, 12-5. But here's the thing, like, they're easily going to compete to be the number one seed again. And I think for the next several years, they're going to be not just one of the best teams in the NFC, but one of the best teams in the league. So what Dan Campbell did with Detroit, like, if Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama and wins, he's a winner. It's what he should do, but he's not ultimately going to get that much credit because like, it's Alabama, right? Kind of what we do here, right? But when you're Lane Kiffin and you go to Ole Miss and then you win back-to-back double-digit win seasons for the first time in like program history, that's impressive. Going to SC and not winning 10 games is like, what the fuck are you doing? The NFL is a little different because the quality of the salary cap and every team has money, but the Lions are much more of an outlier than they are just like the rest of the league historically. And he went and he immediately changed the culture, and now they easily should have won that game against the 49ers. Now, you could say that was a problem. He kicked the field goal, whatever, but Dan Campbell's a big-time coach. I don't see right now for the next 5 years how you could feel better about taking like Mike Tomlin than Dan Campbell. I couldn't do it just because he said he'd bite your knees 3 years ago at an introductory press conference. And all these guys with English degrees thought he was, a meathead. Like, I'm impressed with Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell can coach my football team any day of the week and twice on Sundays. Number 6, this guy's been a rocket ship since the moment he got in the NFL. I read today when I was doing a little research on him, his former teammates still call him Cap, as in captain. He technically wasn't the team captain his rookie of the year, though he was the rookie defensive player of the year. And in the NFL, this is not the NBA. You don't get to just go from being high-level player to head coach. You have to start as a quality control guy. And that's where he did for Kyle Shanahan. And within 3 or 4 years, he's the defensive coordinator. And I got news for you. Kyle Shanahan's had a lot of success. He's easily their best defensive coordinator over that time. And one of them has a head coaching job right now with the New York Jets and help lead them to a Super Bowl. If I need a defensive coordinator, I'm taking DeMeco over Robert Saleh, and I ain't even hesitating. DeMeco's special. When I was with Philly, we traded for him. It was after he had a bad Achilles injury, and he was never the same as a player. But his character, his leadership, he is beloved by people. And let's face it, coaching is a people business. Defensively, he's awesome. But I think some of these younger defensive coaches, his ability to interact with the offensive guys is pretty unique. And I don't, a defensive coach wouldn't be my first choice, but sometimes there are exceptions. And I think DeMeco Ryans is just one of those exceptions. I think the NFL is lucky that a guy that made as much money as he's made loves football as much as he loves football and wants to do this. Now, obviously, at this point in time, he's making a lot of money again, but he's a special coach. And like I said, in this exercise, if I'm drafted, I don't have CJ Stroud on my team. I wouldn't give a shit. If DeMeco Ryans my coach, I feel pretty good about it. And that's the cool part about this list. Like, I think that division has 2 of the better coaches in the league. And it turns out they're both young. I mean, Shane Steichen's 39 years old. I didn't write down DeMeco's age. He can't be older than 40, maybe 41. I mean, both these guys, if they want to do this for a long time, have a chance to be really, really special in this league. Obviously, DeMeco went 10-7 last year. He won a playoff game. Let's face it, kicked the Browns' ass. Now, it was Joe Flacco going to beat you, but regardless, lot of people are going to be picking him. I think they're going to be really good, a lot like the Colts over these next couple of years because it's a coach league and a quarterback league. Now, D'Amico has the quarterback. We'll find out if Shane does. But good coaches figure it out. Period, point blank, end of story. Forget what the calendar says. Football season is right around the corner. And that means Best Ball Week at DraftKings isn't far behind. Here's what you need to know. DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest is their biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed prize pool with that's right, 2 millionaires being crowned for the first and second place. If you're a set it and forget it type, I know I am, then Best Ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger rosters, so injuries will not ruin your season. Only the draft, and that's it. You're set for the year. Some of you might have heard I won $18,000 a couple weeks ago at the U.S. Open. It's an incredible high. But $15 million in prize pool, how do you beat that? Multiple millionaires crowned with winning this. I can't even imagine the high being in the mix. And like they said, no roster management. Injuries won't impact you because you got bigger rosters. Still not convinced? Check this out. This year, DraftKings is offering everyone a draft one, get one special. Your $20 entry fee scores you a bonus ticket. Get ready for Best Ball Week at DraftKings. Download the DraftKings app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for all customers who enter the NFL Best Ball 15 Millionaire Contest to get a bonus ticket. Only during Best Ball Week, only on DraftKings. Number 5. If you would have told me a couple years ago I would have had this guy here, I don't think I would have believed you. Because anytime you inherit Aaron Rodgers, even if you're a major reason, and even Aaron talked about this, that you resurrect his career. Aaron won back-to-back MVPs under this guy. And I thought in 2021, the year they lost to Tampa, that's as good as Aaron's played. But when you take a late first-round pick that is a major project, sit him for 3 years, and by the time he finally starts, by the end of the year, people are going, does he kind of look like Aaron Rodgers? Is he kind of playing like Aaron Rodgers? And then go on the road with that player in a playoff game and eviscerate the Dallas Cowboys? It's one thing to win a tight game. It's the playoffs. It happens. They beat the living piss out of Dallas. Here's LaFleur's records. He went 13-3, 13-3, 13-3. Obviously at Aaron. Then the year they kind of fell apart, he went 8-9. And then this year, boom, back in the playoffs, wins a game with Jordan Love. If Jordan Love keeps playing like he does, like he did the final 8 games, the Packers have a chance to be the 1 seed. Like, that's how talented the team is. And their coach is really good. He's 56-27. And I think a lot of people, and rightfully so, are always hesitant when you get to inherit, even if he's coming off a bad year, an all-time great player. Aaron's going to get more credit than LaFleur. I don't know how anyone could have watched last season and go, wait, this guy coaches the quarterback, he calls the plays, and he's my head coach. And we're in the second round of the playoffs against the number 1 seed, and let's face it, they probably should have won that game if it wasn't for Purdy pulling out some plays out of his ass. Now, here's the one thing with LaFleur. Defensive coordinator. Is he going to get it right? Because if he gets it right, and Jeff Hafley's the guy, anytime you're the offensive play caller and you're dealing with the quarterback, even if your defense sucks, you can get 9 to 10 wins. But if you get that defensive coordinator right and your defense becomes a top 7, 8, 10 defense in the league, that's when you start winning 12 or 13 games. Now, Joe Barry, clearly his buddy, just wasn't any good. And let's face it, it's very, very difficult to be a good coordinator in the league. So Joe Barry is much more normal than he is what the elite guys are. The high-end guys are a small percentage of coaches. Most coaches that become coordinators turn out to be pretty average or below. That is the majority. So even if he was good buddies with Joe Barry, he took a lot of shit for it. He easily could have hired John Williamson, and that guy have looked like Joe Barry. But you go get Jeff Hafley, who coached at Ohio State, who coached for Kyle Shanahan, who was a head coach with Boston College, who knows DBs, high-energy guy. If they're good, the Packers are going to be really good. Because offensively, LaFleur's a baller. Like, there's no disputing that. And what he did with Jordan Love last year, Holy shit. 3 and 4, the Harbaugh brothers. I'm going to go John 4, Jim 3. If you wanted to argue with me and flip-flop it, okay. Personally, I'm a Jim guy, but have a ton of respect for John. I'm a believer that certain human beings are put on this earth to do certain things. It could be a writer, could be a painter, could be an architect. These guys, the moment Jack Harbaugh conceived both of them and they came out of that womb, were put on this earth to coach football. And it's greatly benefited my life as a football fan, specifically Jim. But let's start with John. He has had sustained success over a long period of time. He did go through a little dip there with the Joe Flacco years, but obviously Lamar Jackson has changed the game. Knowing some people that work for that organization, they just say his team meetings and the way he handles the operation is just unlike anything they've ever seen. Like I said, Jim and John, born to do this shit. And last year was tough. It was. Now, Jim has had those moments too, where it's like, you got to win this game. You don't have to win the Super Bowl, but you got to win the AFC Championship game. It's at home. You're the favorite. You have the better roster top to bottom. You got to win the game. And he doesn't. Like, if he wins that game, even if he loses the Super Bowl, which I think he would have won, but let's just say he won that game, I would have put him over Jim. But like this notion, well, John beat Jim in the Super Bowl back in 2012. Well, yeah, Jim's a champion now too. And I think if you play that game 10 times, probably a coin flip. Maybe they split 5-5. Maybe one guy's wins 6-4. But you can't tell me what Jim has been doing at Michigan and John's Super Bowl way back in the day with, let's face it, a lot of inherited players. This is now his operation, and they're damn good. They're awesome. Last year was tough. And if he wins that game, I'll put him against his brother. And if Jim hadn't won the biggest game of Jim's career, you could say it was a Super Bowl. But since that game, was not the national championship game. He was not going to lose to Washington. The biggest game of Jim's career was Nick Saban at the Rose Bowl in the Final Four. Because the previous year to lose to Sonny Dykes was one of the worst losses of his career. Michigan cannot lose that game. They should not lose that game. And if you played it 100 times, I would imagine Michigan wins 95 plus. But Saban's team had them on the ropes. It was like, this team, with all these guys getting drafted, you're going to lose to Nick Saban. And then he found a way to win it. And then they cruised the national championship. And now Jim comes back to the Chargers. And let's face it, Jim's a baller. Jim won at San Diego. He won at Stanford, which when he inherited Stanford, Bruce Feldman told me one time, and he's been covering college football for 25 years, it is easily the most impressive thing he's ever seen. What Jim Harbaugh did at Stanford. They weren't just 1-11. They were they were losing to UC Davis. They were a joke. Within 3 or 4 years, Jim had them in a BCS game. And then obviously David Shaw takes over and they're a top 5 program for like the next 5 years. Jim goes to the 49ers, who he inherited a lot of talent. That talent was playing awful. They had been consistently bad since Steve Mariucci was fired, quit, or traded. I don't even remember how that breakup happened. But from 2002 to 2010, the Niners were a joke. There were moments in 2005 when it might have been 2004. It was either 2004 or 2005. Conversations we had in college. Could Pete Carroll's USC team beat San Francisco? Which is always going to be one of my favorite conversations of all time. Because we'll actually never know the answer, even though everyone thinks they know the answer, but we'll never see the game. But when you watch the two teams play, you're like, well, Pete's got a first rounder at like every position. They are dominating with a bunch of NFL guys. And this Niner team is unwatchable. And then 5 years later, Jim takes over and boom, they're in the NFC Championship game. And then boom, they're in the Super Bowl. And then boom, they're in the NFC Championship game. In his disastrous year, which essentially got him fired, he didn't win 3 or 4 games. He went 8-8. And at the time, Kaepernick couldn't hit the broadside of the barn if he was standing next to it. They had no offense. Quarterback couldn't complete a pass. And they had, I think, Patrick Willis had retired. Like, it kind of unraveled quick. And he still kept it competitive. And he went to Michigan, went a little slower than I thought. But by the end, what happened? Urban owned him. Urban's a better college coach. I will give you that. But Jim isn't just a college coach. He's a football coach, coaches the NFL and coaches college. Urban got ran out of town so fast your head spun when he went to Jacksonville. Jim can do both. And once Urban left, he started kicking Ryan Day's teeth in. And then this year, he beat Nick Saban, and the rest is history. And now he's coming back to the Chargers. But here's what I know. And this is what makes Jim so special. Start from scratch. You could argue there might not be anybody better just starting from scratch. The only reason I don't have him a little higher is because he hasn't been in the league in a while. But I'm expecting 10-plus wins from the Chargers. When I say plus, do they have like a 13-win season? But I would expect 10 wins from the Chargers this year. So let me recap. I got McDermott 10, Tomlin 9, Shane Steichen 8, Dan Campbell 7, D'Amico Ryan 6, Matt LaFleur 5, John Harbaugh 4, Jim Harbaugh 3.
Do you have an upcoming fantasy football draft? Your preparation is not complete until you've used the Draft Wizard from Fantasy Pros. Draft Wizard is the simplest way to turn any set of rankings into cheat sheet form, to have the most realistic mock draft experience to get you ready for draft day, and you have a personal assistant giving you live pick-by-pick advice on that draft day. Get the ultimate cheat code for your fantasy football draft with Draft Wizard. Get started today at fantasypros.com/volume.
This is a tough one. This is a little like Jim and John. McVay and Kyle. And if you want to give me that one guy's got a Super Bowl, the other guy doesn't, I don't really have a comeback to that. Because Kyle Shanahan has dominated Sean McVay. But in the biggest game they ever played, the NFC Championship game in LA, Kyle lost. Now, Kwaski Tart, if he just catches the ball in his breadbasket, it's Niners win. But here's the thing. Sean McVay, who I put 2, is he's an elite coach. What he did last year, the way they were playing at the end of the season, I love Sean McVay. To me, the difference on why I put McVay 2 and Kyle 3, or Kyle 1, excuse me, is simply because Sean McVay thought about quitting last year. So if I'm hiring a guy from scratch, Jim Harbaugh's never leaving football. He's not going to TV, right? Dan Campbell, Shane Steichen, even Mike Tomlin, Sean McDermott. These guys are football guys, all they know. Sean McDermott told Chris Long, he's like, it was crazy, but I look back, I don't know how I did it, but it was clearly I was contemplating leaving. Thought I was going to leave. So anytime that thought has not only entered, but you almost executed, that's the difference here. Because here's what I know. I would expect Kyle Shanahan to coach football till he's 70 years old, even though he's already making probably $15, $16 million. And Sean McVay, who I think their team's going to be really good. And if I had to start from scratch, you got Sean McVay, even if I only got a couple years with him, I'd feel pretty good about it. But when I'm taking an elite guy, no one has ever thought, you know what Andy Reid's going to do? He's going to go do TV for a couple years. He just needs a break. You know what Belichick needs? A break. Football guys at the highest level eat, breathe, and sleep it 24/7, 365. And that thought, even if it crossed their mind, they kick it out immediately. Now, Sean, we'll see how long he's in this for. Again, I'm not trying to talk shit. I got him number 2. I think he's excellent. And I think the defining attribute of him and Kyle, they control the quarterback, they control the plays, they value defense, and they just win at the highest level. Now, Sean has won a Super Bowl. Kyle hasn't, but Kyle's been to 4 NFC Championship games in 5 years. And Sean won a Super Bowl with Matt Stafford, who, let's face it, if he hadn't played in Detroit his whole career, would probably been considered a top 5 or 6 guy for a lot of it. He's an elite player. Kyle Shanahan won with Jimmy Garoppolo. I got news for you. Jimmy Garoppolo ain't that good. And now he's winning with Brock Purdy, who is good, was the last pick in the 7th round. 2 years ago, when Matt Stafford got hurt, the Rams imploded. They were a disaster. It was an embarrassment, which led to the Detroit Lions ultimately getting the number 6 overall pick, which they flipped to 12 and ended up with the running back in Laporta. But I saw Kyle Shanahan start a season with a guy I don't even think he wanted at the time. But by that point in time, Trey Lance broke his ankle. Jimmy Garoppolo comes in, breaks his foot, and still makes the NFC Championship with a third-string quarterback. I would argue 2 years ago is more impressive than anything Sean McVay's ever done. So I like both these guys. I think they are carbon copies in terms of the way they value defense, the way they value a coaching staff, the way, the attention to detail, uh, just how hard their teams play. But I'm going Kyle one. Middlekauff, you're just a homer. Like, listen, Kyle drives me nuts sometimes, but a lot like Dan Campbell, when Kyle got to the 49ers in 2017, it doesn't get any worse. It doesn't get any worse. And within 3 years, they're in the Super Bowl. And now he's gone to multiple Super Bowls with two different quarterbacks that even the guy he currently has, half people that talk about football don't even think the guy's good. Jimmy Garoppolo definitely was pretty average. Now, at the time in 19, he was actually solid. But they went to multiple NFC championships after that with the guy. It's like it's been incredible what he's done. I think one defining attribute of both these guys, and Andy Reid definitely has this, and this is the difference of them right now and Matt LaFleur. The emphasis they put on defense, the emphasis they put on toughness, the emphasis they put on physicality is undeniable. And a big reason the Packers in LaFleur's time didn't win a Super Bowl when they had Aaron Rodgers, physicality. If they hadn't been more physical, and this goes back to McCarthy too, back when a lot of people would have considered him a top 10 coach in his heyday with the Packers, it was defense. Defense, defense, defense. You have to have a good defense. And these offensive coaches that value that, it matters. And the offensive players you get, now Andy likes a speed guy, but physicality in your offensive players. Look at the moment Andy Reid put Pacheco in. Look at the moment Kieran Williams started playing for Sean McVay. Look at the moment Christian McCaffrey, like physical players. I don't care what the rules say in this sport about the flags and all the bullshit. It will always be a physical game. And the more physical teams, the reason the 49ers did not win a Super Bowl last year, because Kansas City was more physical on defense. And listen, Kyle made a mistake. There's no doubt about it. Hiring Steve Wilkes. That's why the guy got fired at the end of the season. In a tough spot, losing to Miko. They didn't really have a guy on staff. Now he goes with Sorensen. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him. But I think both Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan have lost a ton of coaches. A ton. And they just keep on chugging. And here's the other thing. Like, their coaches go on, and they're, like, impressive. You're like, Kevin O'Connell, impressive dude. LaFleur, impressive dude. Mike McDaniel, even though I don't think the Dolphins are going anywhere, somehow getting to the playoffs, losing every year, but it's why I didn't put him on this list. I would not take Mike McDaniel over any of these guys. Robert Saleh hasn't been great, but D'Amico Ryans, like, it changes your life to coach for these people. Just like, it still does, but for a long, long period of time in Philadelphia and then early on in Kansas City, Andy Reid changed people's lives. And a lot of those guys went on to have success, right? Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Sean McDermott has won a ton in Buffalo. Ron Rivera went to a Super Bowl. So that is the stain on Belichick's kind of legacy, is really two things. One, he thought Brady couldn't play anymore. Brady could. And two, all of his coaches suck. Like, they're not like, it was kind of mediocre. It's like, no, this guy sucks. Like, we got to get Josh McDaniels out of the building. This guy, he cannot finish. Matt Patricia, like, get him out. You don't say that about McVay and Kyle's guys. Like, you want to be around them more. So I got Kyle 1, Sean McVay 2. Obviously, Andy would have been the easy call, but why I removed him. I don't know. I guess I felt pretty good. I don't even think I guess you could make the argument for McDaniel. I can't. I don't know. I think he's good. I'd have him probably 11 or 12. If Rabel was in the league, he definitely would have been in the mix, and I would imagine he'll get in the mix. But this was a fun little exercise.